Welcome to podcast 17. I'm your host, Hamza Intonweni, and I'm going to provide for you another episode. So in this episode of podcast 17, we're going to talk about education versus financial literature. What do I mean? That fine, people undergo education, but they lack the skill of financial literacy. What do I mean? Because people undergo education and obtain what you call degrees, and what they forget a key aspect in life, which is financial literacy. Financial literacy, in its own embodiment, contains things like accounting, contains things like investing, among other things. But one of the things that are very critical to people, especially the people that are going to handle business, is understanding that when it comes to running a business, you have to monitor the income, you have to monitor the expenditure, and above all, when you're doing any business, you have to look at one critical point, which is the fact that the expenditures should not be more than the income. The income should be greater than the expenditure. If the expenditures are greater than your income, meaning that you are investing, you are putting a lot of money in the business, but it is not bringing out returns. And when I talk about the other key aspect, which is investment, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, talks about one critical important thing, in that your assets, your investment in the assets should be more, and the liabilities should be less. What does it mean? That you have to invest in things like treasury bonds, among other things. Why? Because when you invest in things like treasury bonds, the money works for you over you working for money. Where do I draw this picture from? As a person that has done a bit of cake business, I can inform you that if the major aim of a person is to work for money, you can do the business for a long time and that money does not come to you. However, if you invest in things, for example, if I have talked about the treasury bonds and other things, there you deposit that money and it keeps on accumulating over time, which is different from the fact that when you are at work and you're working for money, you might spend a lot buying materials and what, but indeed you might not have a very valuable return. So I don't discourage people from starting businesses, but I encourage people that if you start a business and it is earning and your business is booming, don't forget to save a bit of the money that you attain. Why? Because when you save that a bit of the money that you attain and invest it, this business is going to be funding the investments that you are carrying out. And above all, what I can communicate to people is that if a person is able to invest in side businesses, things like buying the bonds and things like real estate, these things can help push that person up the ladder to being rich and wealthy. The last point I have to talk about is that in this Ugandan system, we are brainwashed to think that you have to study and work at a given profession. But as in my earlier episodes, there's one thing I did not elaborate more on, is that when you work in different spheres, let's say you work in sales, you work in advertisement, you get knowledge in your head from different points of life. And how does it impact your business? Let's say I am a baker. Getting that sort of information helps you in your business. How? You're going to use that knowledge you attained from sales to boost your business. And two, you're going to use that advertising knowledge to advertise for your business. So you attaining knowledge from different spheres objectively helps you in promoting your businesses and making them to groom or making them grow as a person. I beg to rest my case.